don't overestimate your worth, your function to the rest of the body. But at the same time, don't underestimate your contribution. If Eeyore was a Christian, I imagine him saying something like, I'm just a foot, a stinky, ugly old, hairy old foot, and because I'm not a beautiful hand with opposable thumb, I'm of no use to this body. Come on. That's not how the body works. And I wonder if some of you actually feel this way as you consider your part in the church. Possibly some of you have quieter personalities that don't like being the center of attention. Maybe some of you are moms and dads with many responsibilities around home, or you're a senior that you can't go at the pace you'd like to. You can't engage in ministry at the same pace as others. Maybe there are those of you who have gifts in other areas, again, those behind the scenes kinds of ways. Maybe God has placed you in the body to exercise encouraging, supportive gifts. Maybe you even have physical or emotional limitations, so you can't operate in the same way that other members of the body do. And if you're a person like that, you may be saying, I don't belong in this body. I'm not a super Christian. I'm not well versed. I'm not good at praying publicly for people up front. What you need to know is that God has not designed us all alike. In fact, He has designed all of us differently so that we can function as a body. Different members of the body fulfilling different roles, but every one of us has a part to play. Don't underestimate the contribution that God has designed you to make and placed you within the church to utilize. In fact, if you don't contribute, we all lose out. Some of you may know about this, but I tree planted as a way of paying my way through my undergraduate degree. And my last year, early in the spring, I somehow got a thorn in my left ring finger. And I didn't even really notice it going in. Probably for quite a few days I didn't know it was there. But after a while, I noticed that my finger was starting to be irritated a bit. It was being a bit red. I couldn't really see that there was anything in there. But as the days progressed, it got more and more sensitive to the point that it got really red. This is not an actual picture. This is just an analogy for what it kind of looked like. It got to the point where I could not touch it with anything before my hand just exploded in pain, which is problematic when you're trying to put your hand inside the ground 3,000 times a day. So it got to the point where I had to stop working because my finger hurt. And in my day off, I had to go to the doctor in Prince George, and I took him in there. I showed him very tenderly my hand, and he asked, "What's the problem?" And he said, I said, "Well, my finger really hurts." And he looked at it, and he said, "Go to the sink." And I knew this was not going to go well. And he turned on the cold water at full blast, and he told me to put it under the water. And he grabbed my finger as hard as he could and squeezed it as hard as he could, and it literally exploded into the sink as my tears exploded in the room. And he said, "Does that hurt?" Now, when you think about that, it's just a little thorn in my ring finger. It wasn't my legs or my brain. I didn't have any broken bones. Just a little thorn in my finger. But because of that, my entire body was not able to do what it was supposed to do, which is plant trees. Why? Because a little part was not operational. My hand couldn't say to the finger, we don't need you, let's keep going. The whole body shut down. In the same way, we need every member of the body contributing the way God has designed them to contribute. In fact, this analogy of the body pays special attention to body parts that are quote-unquote weaker. Let's keep reading. We stopped at verse 20. Let's just read 21 to 26. The eye cannot say to the hand, "I don't need you," and the head cannot say to the feet, "I don't need you." On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there would be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. It sounds difficult. What are you saying, Paul? Here's what I think he's trying to say. As you know, our bodies have organs: the heart, your liver, your kidneys, your stomach, your bowels. These organs are more susceptible to injury and damage, and we might call them, quote unquote, the weaker parts of the body. But God has designed your liver and your heart in such a way that those parts are indispensable. They get actually special privilege in your body because they get protection inside because they are so important. Other parts of the body, which shall go unnamed right now, say, for example, the reproductive organs, play very critical parts in our lives. But we all agree they are more private. They are what Paul calls the unpresentable parts. Because of their unique role and their value and their function in the body, they are clothed and treated with special modesty. The point is, the parts of the body that may seem at first sight weak or vulnerable or behind the scenes, actually in our human bodies play a critical role in body function. So he's saying people in the church who play a different role, a background role, are so-called weaker people. In reality, play a significant part in what God is doing in the kingdom. Don't judge how important anyone else is simply by how much airtime they get on a Sunday morning, or by how prominent they are in the church, or how spiritual their role may seem. God will make sure that each part of the body is honored equally. As verse 24 and 25 state, God has combined members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that each part should have equal concern for one another. So, if you have an illness, if you are weaker right now, if you are wearing out, if you are going through loss, a difficult season of life, I want to ask you this afternoon not to withdraw from the body. Do not try to remove or isolate yourself from us. In the body, the weaker parts, the parts that are going through difficulty, are treated with special honor. The weaker parts of the body give everyone else the ministry of suffering along with others. I think maybe Scott demonstrated that to us this morning. It's a blessing for us to cry with you, to hear your stories, to meet your needs. It's not just that you need us, we need you. God has made this body just the way He wants it. So where have we been? Well, number one, God has designed the body to be a unity. And yet, even though He calls us together, the church functions best if we all play our diverse roles. And as we play those roles, don't overestimate your value, but nor should you underestimate your part either. And remember that the weak and so-called vulnerable parts among us have a role to play too. Let me just conclude by making a few practical applications to our lives in the short time that I have left. Number one, if you're sitting there hearing all this stuff about, different roles and functions and body members, how do you know what your function is in the body of Christ? I would tell you that there are lots of spiritual gift tests that you can take out there, just like you can find in Chatelaine, what personality or what man you should belong with. You can also take great spiritual gift tests. I just totally knocked it. If you are a spiritual gift test writer, I'm sorry. I would say, from my experience, however, that the best way to figure out what your function is in the body is to get in there and try stuff. Sometimes that might seem counterintuitive, but often I think your personality and your history and your experience are used by God to point you in the right direction. So try stuff. Get involved. If you kind of feel a leading or that you're naturally inclined to something, that might be a good sign that God is calling you to function that way. And if we are honest with each other, we should tell each other whether, the body is being blessed or maybe you should try another ministry. So those of you who feel tentative about that, I want to call you to be a courageous part. Get out and try some things. Volunteer for some stuff. I'm going to bash that word in a second, but give some things a try. And to those of you among us who do a million different things, that you are like multitasking body part because you just do a lot of stuff, I would call out to you on the basis of this text that maybe you shouldn't be doing it all. Maybe a way that you function as a better body member is to be more alert for the gifts, the talents, the abilities that those around you have, and invite them to begin exercising those. Some of us, I believe, who've been in a community for a long time, we just kind of, well, I've always done it, I need to do it, and if I don't keep doing it, it's just going to stop. Perhaps it's time for us to invite others into what we're doing so everyone gets to play.